Hi, this is Steve with Nee Family Lights. Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to show how I built the large Boscoyo arches. I have 8 of these in my show, and it's a great way to add some curves. They run across my entire front of my house, and it provides a nice barrier for viewers to stay off the yard. We will review the build instructions and cover one additional step that I think is missing, which I call the shaping step. Plus, I'll show a few tips and tricks on how I set up the wiring and how I deploy them into the yard. Whether you're making the large, medium, or small Boscoyo arches, or the triple arch, or any other type of arch made out of Coro or ABS, making a lightweight and sturdy frame is going to be key to making sure that those arches look great in your show. If you find this video useful, hit that like and subscribe button. Now let's get right to it. Alright, so we're taking a look at the Boscoyo website, and what we have here is the large arch, which looks great at $6. You get 3 pieces of 4mm Coro. It has 17 holes in each piece, making up a total of 51 holes. The $6, if you add in all the rest of the stuff, comes out to about $32 an arch. That's $11 for all the things from the local home improvement store, and then $15 or so in pixels, assuming 30 cents per pixel for 50 pixels. We'll take a look down here at the description. It says here, holes every 2 inches, and it's based on a 6-foot 4-inch circle, designed to mount on a 1/2-inch PVC frame for support. What I found is the 6 foot 2 inches wide is right, and then for the height, mine came out to 3 feet 6 inches tall. So if you get it down to 3 feet 2 inches tall, it's a little too short, and the Coro pieces don't quite line up. So we'll show that here in a little bit. Let's scroll down to the assembly area here, and when I built my arches, I built them exactly to the T the way this is done, plus one additional step for the shaping. Boscoyo says to use 1/2-inch PVC pipe. For the 1/2-inch PVC, you definitely want to use schedule 40. If you end up getting schedule 80, the wall thickness is too thick, so it's not going to bend nicely. That 1/2-inch PVC piece that you get is typically 10 feet long, so you want to make sure you get the full 10-foot length piece. The 1/2-inch EMT comes also in a 10-foot length, and you'll end up cutting that down to 6 feet. You'll need 2 1/2-inch PVC Tees, and then a couple of self-tapping screws. I'll have links to the items that I purchased to make this arch in the description below. So you'll leave the 10-foot PVC piece intact, and you'll cut the 1/2-inch EMT to 6 foot 0 inches in length. I went ahead and did exactly as this says, glue the T's on the ends of the PVC so you can look straight through the pipe, and you'll have both of the perpendicular taps going in the same direction. So here is PVC T, got to go into the PVC, and you'll see that the tap is coming up on the far complete other end. Here's another PVC T, and the tap is going up. So you're going to want to do that so when you bend it, they'll both be facing towards the middle where the T's are coming off. You can use cement glue, glue that together so it's nice and tight and locked in. And then I did wait overnight, and I then inserted the 1/2-inch EMT into the perpendicular hole of one of the T's. And this is a key thing here. You want to do that in a way that it does not block the hole of the PVC. I'll show some steps on how to mitigate in case you do block that PVC T hole, and Boscoyo notes that it sticks in about 5/8 of an inch depending on the fitting. Once you have that in, you'll take a 1 1/4 inch screw and put it right through there. Let me get a piece of EMT. This is what it would look like going in, and then you put your screw there. And this is where you have a variability in how far it can go in. And the reason why they say only go in about 5/8 of an inch is because if you look in through that end there, you're going to want to be able to stick a piece of rebar in the ground to hold the arches up. So if this is going in too far, then you're going to have problems getting that rebar in there. And I'll show a little step later on how to handle that if it goes in just a little bit. The first side is pretty good to get in, just so that way it's not sticking through. But once you bend over the PVC all the way around, and then try to get the other end in, you're going to have a lot of resistance, and you may end up getting it where your piece of EMT is just a little too far, but that's okay. So you'll stick your 1 1/4 inch self-tapping screws in, bend it all the way around, and then put the second screw in. Then they have here to mark the middle of the arch and place one of the coral pieces in the center line. What I recommend here is you're going to want to do some shaping first. You do want to mark the middle of the arch, and you also want to mark the center part of the EMT on the bottom. And then you're going to want to take one of these tie-down straps and go from the top of the arch to the bottom of the arch. And I'll show you a picture here. And so what you're seeing is I've got 7 of my arches kind of sitting in the sun, but they're all kind of put together with the tie-down straps from the center of the arch to the center of the bottom piece. And what I did was I pulled the height down and I laid it on the ground with the 3 coral pieces to see how much height I needed. And I found that 3 feet 6 inches is a perfect height to get those 3 coral pieces to be lined up perfectly. And if you pull the tie-down straps 3 inches tighter to about 3'3", and then let it sit a couple days in the sun, or if you don't have sun to heat them up to heat treat that shape, then you can use a heat gun to do that. And once you have that shaped, you can see here in this picture, I've got 7 of them that are pulled down with the tie-down straps. One of them is not, so you can see that it's about 3 inches taller when it's not being shaped. And I just ran out of tie-down straps, so once I had one freed up, then I put it on the other one to shape the last one. Alright, after that, the instructions say here to use the zip ties. So here's a picture of the large arch with the 3 segments zip tied to the PVC frame, and it's just ready for the pixels to be stuck in. So then when we get to the bottom of the instructions here, it says now you can install your RGB nodes, and so you can put in 50 or 51. I use 51. And the last thing here is noted that you can use 3/8 inch rebar or smooth bar. I had a hard time finding that rebar at my home improvement store, so I ended up buying a 1/2 inch rebar, and that does fit fine into the PVC Tees. You can buy the 1/2 inch rebar in 2-foot sections, which is plenty long to stick into the ground, and you'll have about 6 to 8 inches of that rebar sticking up to go into the end of your arch, so you'll need 2 pieces of rebar. Or what I did was I purchased a single 10-foot piece and I cut 5 sections out of it. Okay, let's look at the tools and materials used. Okay, here's a look at all the stuff you're going to need. PVC Tees. This comes in a pack of 15, so it's enough to make almost 8 arches. Looks like that. You'll need a pipe cutter of some sort to cut your EMT. You'll need a file, and you may not need this, but it's helpful. Here's your self-tapping screws, a tie-down strap. I have a little small piece of EMT, so again it comes in 10-foot sections and you'll cut 4 feet off of it. And then you'll need a piece of Schedule 40 PVC. And again, this comes in a 10-foot piece and you'll use the full 10-foot piece without having to do any cutting. Alright, you'll also need some PVC glue, primer and cement. And the last thing is some rebar. So this is a 1/2 inch rebar that I use to secure the arches into the ground. So here's one of the arches. It's quite a bit larger than it would appear. It's a 10-foot piece of PVC bent around. Come to the end, you can see the PVC Tees at the end, and the 6-foot piece of EMT, which does give a lot of structure to it. Especially when you first set it up, there's going to be a lot of force to try to bend that EMT bar, but it does a great job. So let me flip it around to the back side. Okay, now I have the arch flipped around so you can see it from the back. First thing I'm going to do is measure the height here to the middle. As you can see, it is, let me get it square on. It's 3 foot and 6 inches. So when you use the pull down straps, you're going to want to pull it down to 3'3", maybe 3'4", just to get the shaping done. And once you leave it in the sun for a little bit, once you release that tie down strap, it'll bounce right back and should be right at 3/6, which kind of makes this a perfect setup. Let me show the end down here. This part is screwed in, and let me get a couple pieces and show you what this looks like. So one of the tricky things to get right on this arch setup is this little corner here with the EMT going into the T. So here's a T and then a piece of EMT. When you stick that in there, it only needs to go so far and you can put the screw in, but I found that there's a lot of slop here and a lot of wiggle room. And if you look through here, if you end up putting the EMT too far, you won't be able to put any rebar into the ground to hold your arches up. So ideally you want it to be clear and free so your rebar can stick through. What I ended up doing is coming in a little bit just to get rid of some of that slop, putting the screw on, and then taking the file and filing down this little edge here, just so that way it's flush again to the PVC. So it's a little extra work. I found it to be easier to do when there's so much play in this if you're not far enough in. The first part is easier. When you pull the PVC around and you end up doing the other end, let's just say this thing is flipped all the way over, you do the other end, it's going to be under tension, and it'll actually be easier to kind of lock it in by sticking it a little bit farther, which will be like that, and then it'll hold itself much better. Put the screw in, and then you can then file it down. So a little extra work, but that part is a little tricky, and you want to make sure this area is clear so that your rebar can stick through. And a quick note on the rebar, we'll see if we can do this. So here's our 1/2 inch rebar, and just so you can see, it will go clear through there. And you just want to make sure that that opening is clear. So I end up pounding the rebar in the ground and let the rebar come up about maybe 8 inches or so. So it'll come through here and go through most of this relatively straight part. So the third thing I wanted to show is how these are wired. So you've got the height right, and you've got the corners good, so that way they'll stand with the rebar. And the last thing is the wiring. So this is the 50 nodes to here, and then you can see I've added one for 51. And if all you had was your short little pigtail going to your pixel here, and a short little pigtail coming off of the back end, then you'll have a hard time connecting one arch coming here to the next arch. So what I did was I cut the pigtail off and added the 4-core monoprice speaker wire, and it's about 2 feet of extension, and then I reconnected the pigtail here. So if you take a look at the picture I'm showing, you'll see that I've got the 3 wires of the 4 speaker wire, and I'm just running one to each. If you want to, you can double up on the ground. I ended up not doing that, and I used the standard 3/16 inch heat shrink for each wire. And then once all those wires were done, I added a 1/4 inch heat shrink over the whole thing. So once you do that here in the beginning, I didn't add any additional wiring. We'll come all the way out over to the end. And so at the end here, I actually didn't add anything because that 2 foot was long enough to reach to chain all the arches. All the arches are built the same way, so they can be placed anywhere in the yard. Okay, now let's take a look at how I wired things up to the controller boxes. Okay, now we're taking a look at a screenshot image of my X-Lights layout from my show. And if you saw my CG1500 build box, I have that mounted to a pole right behind one of these mini trees. And I will draw a circle around the mini tree. Right there. So right behind there is a CG1500, and inside there has a smart receiver and a power distro board. I'm using one of the smart receiver outputs to drive all 8 of the arches, which is 408 pixels at 51 pixels per arch. I'm doing this at 30% brightness, and in order to have all those run properly, I'm using 2 T power injection lines. So let me illustrate what I'm doing here. So coming off the CG1500, I'm running a data, let's get this correct. I'm running a data and power line to the first arch, and I'm using two 10-foot extensions. These are just the standard vendor extensions. Then it'll run across 1, 2, 3 arches, and I then bring from the CG1500 box another 20-foot, two 10-foot leads to a T power injection, and I link it right there in between arches 3 and 4. So at this point it's gone 153 pixels, and then the data continues for the next 3 arches, and then I run another power injection from the power distro board, 3 10-foot extensions to a power injection T right there, and then it finishes up the last 2 arches, and then the last arch, it just ends hanging there. So 1 output from the smart receiver, 2 power distro board outputs to then power injection T, the other set of 3, and the last set of 2. So all 408 pixels using 1 output. And that wraps up this video on how to build perfectly shaped large Boscoyo arches by adding an additional step for shaping. And this can be done for any type of arch using EMT and PVC materials, plus a few extra steps for easy setup when it's time to put out your show. Hope this helps. Till next time, we'll see ya.